We've got so many people in this city and so little resources, so people have to be entrepreneurial or else it's just not going to work.
The Carlton United Brewery site is 5.8 hectares of inner city in the suburb of Chippendale. It's going to become a new neighbourhood. It will be home to several thousand residents, in the order of 5,000 workers, and we hope it'll be a really magnetic hub for entertainment and activity in this part of Sydney.
There's a few galleries around, not a lot. There's a few cafes around, not a lot. It's all sort of starting to emerge right now, but it's always been a very rich, creative and underground scene within Sydney, with things like Land Franchies, Memorial Discotheque and Space 3.
Frasers had been talking to the community of Chippendale and asking them what their interests and preoccupations were, and two things kept on coming up: a real interest in creative and cultural arts and a need for creative spaces, and also an interest in the security of the neighbourhood and a lot of concerns about what would happen during the process of demolition and construction.
Well, Fraser's objectives were about revitalising this precinct, essentially. Their long-term plan is to turn Kensington Street into an entertainment and cultural precinct.
Kensington Lane, at the moment you can see it's basically half a building site. It previously was a mixture of warehouses and small residential terraces that over the years have basically become more and more run down till they're uninhabitable. The long-term plan that they've discussed with council is making that street part of the cultural hub for the broader CUB site, so that it retains a sense of creativity even when it's redeveloped a little bit more.
So it's a multi-arts facility. Essentially it provides residency programs, so that's free space to visual artists and performing artists to practice. It also provides subsidised rehearsal space and event space.
I mean, it's a transition space, so for them to be able to give that back to the community, and in this case make it into artist studios, is incredibly valuable for them in terms of PR and as an appeasing gesture for the council and for residents locally. So there's a strategic position for Fraser to be involved in this, but I think, however, they're still providing space for artists.
They needed a community-based, not-for-profit to run the program. Essentially, they gave us a selection of criteria, objectives that they wanted achieved, and then we negotiated some objectives that we needed to achieve. We have, in the early stages, received quite a lot of speculation, suspicion from our community about where we sat within that relationship, but I think what happens is that just by doing it and just by delivering, that people just realise, in actual fact, this is a beautiful liaison point between corporate and the working artist.
There is a degree of questioning how much you're getting out of the situation and how much they're getting out of it. But I think in this case it's a pretty fair swap. It's a pretty fair trade.
We did a lot of navel gazing. It actually split our board in half. Sam, who drove the project, was really adamant that this, regardless of that potential moral dilemma, it's an opportunity that Sydney artists got free space.
We were part of the first round of artists. We'd been hearing rumours about this space, and we knew that there were, these deserted kind of buildings around here. So we knew that it was happening. But then once it was down on paper and we found out about it, it was a very quick kind of process. Yeah, it was a matter of weeks.
So my role is as the gallery manager here at NG Art Gallery, and I work with Nikki Ginsberg, who was one of the selectors on the curatorial panel of the Fraser Studios residency program. During her time there, when she was selecting the actual artists with the rest of the panel, she realised it would be a good idea to put on an exhibition of the works that were created during the residency. And it was also a lovely connection between underground artists to bring them into a commercial art gallery space and help to raise their profile and their positioning as artists and to expose them to a greater audience. We have video artworks, we have oil painting sculptures, vintage and collected fabric teddy bears by an artist called Jessica Sutton. We have a radio installation behind me, which is collected and processed sounds of the Chippendale environment. and annoying sounds that sort of interact with the mind and you can't escape them, and that's why all of the radios are hanging in this very sort of claustrophobic sort of sense.
There's a mohawk, a quiff, the bob, the ponytail and the afro, and each of these have hair helmets that protect your hair as you fly around, fueling the hydrogen peroxide which fuels your jetpack, as well as sustaining your blonde hair that you need for travel. As a solo practitioner, which invariably most artists are, often they work in collaboration, but I think the majority of artists are solo practitioners and have solo practices, so their practice themselves is quite isolated. So it's really important, and it's nice to come out of your practice for a second and bounce ideas off what you're doing and get an opportunity to really talk about their ideas and yours, you know.
It's about connecting the worlds, and that relates to the name of the exhibition, Underground to Above Ground. You know, raising the profile of these artists who often would be showing in artist-run initiatives. But there's got to be a point where artists get to step up and let their message be heard in a wider sense, and where they get to live off their art.
Part of our hope and expectation when we started the Fraser Studios project that the artists that we met at Fraser Studios could have an enduring influence on the site, and I think that that will happen.
The priority obviously for us first is to get our own house in order and to make sure that we fill our own spaces and that we provide creative opportunities, but we're certainly also looking for opportunities like that provided by Frasers to work with developers or work with building owners and provide short-term leases to artists or creative industries.
Certainly many people have come to us and said we're really interested in what you're doing, and they're following the process really closely. I would expect that many developers will proceed with this kind of activity in the future. It's not very difficult. It's a fantastic benefit both to the developer and to the community.
For us particularly, we're interested in finding models that others can take away, and hopefully that this kind of stuff happens throughout Australia.
I think Frasers didn't really set out to be trailblazing with this exercise. It just seemed to be a really logical way of making use of vacant space.
We've got to find new ways to survive, and I think that's what artists do best, is be entrepreneurial in ways in which they can continue to practice.